Hello and welcome to the Reasonable Music Review, the musical show where we review music free from the hyperbolic rantings and biases of the greater internet. I am looking at you, Instagram comment section.
Today we're going to be looking at Jesse Wells's newest record, The Devil's Den. Now that is not a den that I would want to be in. That's for sure. I said, now that's not a den that I... So if you're not familiar, Jesse Wells is like if you took Bob Dylan, John Prine, and John Burgundy, blended them all into one person, and then made that person blow up on Instagram. So over the past year and a half, Jesse has had a pretty meteoric rise to fame. He initially caught people's attention by posting these incredibly specific, articulate, and witty commentary pieces under the veil of the traditional folk song. And another thing to mention is that he filmed all these videos like just outside in random locations, underneath power lines, deep in the woods, and that combined with his like really rugged, shaggy look made for just a really unique and eye-catching videos. It was kind of a recipe for success. Another thing that's definitely contributed to his fame is how quickly he's able to throw together songs. For example, the United Healthcare CEO was assassinated on December 4th, and within a week, Jesse had a full, super wordy, witty commentary song written, memorized, and posted, which is insane. And he did the exact same thing with topics like Trump's inauguration, the Signal group chat leak, the Trump's tariffs that came out, and so forth and so on. He's done this with so many different topics. And these really rapid responses to modern events really, I think, has transformed Jesse into somewhat of an arbiter of the people, where he's able to pinpoint exactly what people are feeling, when they're feeling it, and just add some comedy to what they're feeling and the things that they're seeing around the world, and describe things in ways that not everybody can. And that's exactly the role that folk music has always played, or has traditionally played, and it's exactly what got people like Bob Dylan and John Prine and John Fogerty on the map. And as extra evidence of that, Jesse Wells was invited to the Newport Folk Festival this year, which is a huge milestone for somebody in this genre. And if you're not familiar with his work and want to try to get an idea of what I'm talking about with these insanely specific, witty, articulate social commentary pieces, I would listen to these 4 songs. All these songs are talking about very relatable, genuine social issues, but just masks them in a lot of hilarity and a lot of nuance and a lot of detail, and just makes for very entertaining but also very thought-provoking songs. And not many people can pull that off. That's a very rare ability. With this album, though, I really think that we're starting to see a more mature, versatile Jesse Wells develop, and I think that might be his goal as well. For reference, I see this album as Jesse's first true step into the commercial music scene. I could be wrong about that, but at least from my perception, that's true, because Jesse has a lot of albums. If you go on Spotify right now, he has a very, very large discography for only being around for a couple of years. But this is the first album that he's promoted to a degree that's like comparable to other artists. He went on Joe Rogan recently. He did the Newport Folk Festival last month. He's been posting about this one a lot more on Instagram. And this album feels a lot more sonically cohesive than a lot of his other work, which just seems more like compilation pieces. And as much as I love Jesse's previous work, there's no doubt that it is not something that is easy to listen to at all hours of the day or in all moods. It's not the most versatile. Like, I'm probably not going to listen to Cancer or War Isn't Murder at 7 in the morning, or listen to it with certain people in the car. With Devil's Den, though, I really see Jesse starting to work on something that's a little bit more appealing across the board. We're going to get into it in detail, but almost every single song on this album is so catchy and infectious, and the music is skillful, and there's just some real musicality packed in this album that I feel like we haven't really seen yet from Jesse Wells. And the social commentary is there, but it's masked in a much more subtle, hard to notice way, where I could listen to this song just for the music or just for the melodies and maybe forget about the social commentary for a little bit, and then a little bit later on dig back into that. So the social commentary isn't just directly in your face like it is in a lot of his other music, which is a great thing and I think works well in his other music, but it's just not great for all times of the day. A great example of this, I would argue, is the first track, The Great Caucasian God. I will say the song is probably the most on the nose in the whole album, to where you can really understand the point that he's trying to get at, and he makes it very clear, but it's still way subtler than Wells' other work, and he uses the musicality to kind of veil everything in this twangy, hymnalistic, gospel sound that you could just enjoy as a plain country song and not think too much about. And that choice to make this song so hymnalistic and gospel-like is really clever, considering the demographic of people he's trying to criticize with it. And I thought phrases like "Lord, be thou near me" and "Does the Lord not abide" were really clever ways to kind of drive the hymnalistic tone home. The next track, though, is a complete change of pace in terms of Jesse's typical music, and then also just a complete contrast to the Great Caucasian God. It's called "In the Morning." It's very happy, or I wouldn't say happy, but it's a very uplifting track, talking about how things have to get worse before they can get better, and that we have things to look forward to, and that things will improve down the road. This song is filled with cliches, so it can be a little less interesting on the surface, in my opinion, but I really like what this song represents, because something that I think is very easy for social commentators to fall into is just the hopelessness of just constantly talking about what's wrong with the world, or how upset they are, how depressing things are, without ever giving any sort of uplifting words, or giving any sort of like insight into how we can improve and where we can go from here. So I really respect that Jesse, who has 100% been one of those people that has just been talking about how depressing things are, which there's value in that, is kind of reeling back a little bit and spreading some positivity out as well. The instrumental is not necessarily the most interesting thing in the world, but I think it does help elevate the song. I especially love like the slippery and slidey guitar around the 2-minute mark. I thought that instrumental break was great. So the next track, Malaise, is probably the highlight of the record for me. I think all the strengths of this album are condensed in this song. The song has a very grand instrumental that pays off very well and works very well, and the harmonica is so satisfying at every single turn. And as a slight side note on the harmonica, Jesse actually has a lot of skill on the harmonica, which I really appreciate, and that's something that you can't really say for a lot of singer-songwriters, old or modern. So one thing that I think is great about this song, and is just amazing about the entire album, is it's such a showcase for Jesse's ear for melody, which is something that like I think a lot of people take for granted until they try it for themselves, and they try to craft melodies by themselves, and they realize how difficult it is. But every single melody on this album, and especially this song, is infectious and catchy and serves the instrumental so well. Because as much as I appreciated Jesse's previous work up until this point, there's no doubt that it was getting a little redundant melodically, where every single song was a very similar sounding, honky, kind of jumpy commentary tune, and all of them sounded very similar. But the versatility that he has melodically, I think, is just amazing. And in terms of writing, I find this song to be very interesting from a storytelling perspective, because we're kind of just inserted into this guy's mind, this kind of washed up, lifeless guy's mind, as he's just presumably watching the TV, and we're just exploring all the thoughts that are coming to him while he's watching TV. At least that's how I take it. And then while he's, watching the TV, he starts thinking about Mars and what life on Mars would be like, and what it would be like to leave Earth. And I see this as a really clever vehicle to talk about a couple different things. The first being like people having opinions that are so much grander than them, and having opinions on things that they maybe really shouldn't. And he talks about that with lines like the preternatural notion, no one consulted me, and I must have missed the meeting, the interdimensional committee. And then 2, I also think it's a really clever commentary and clever way to talk about how like we're constantly talking about escaping our world instead of just trying to fix the world that we have. And then the third thing, which is that we would probably just destroy Mars the same way that we're destroying Earth. And I particularly love the line there, like, with all the frontiers surveyed and all the buffalo put away, jumping down a little bit, we ought to go put the sky in chains. And I also love the small details of like the first line, "at the asylum," or "will Lucifer laugh until he cries," were really clever ways to maybe hint at something about this main character running away from something, or running away from his problems, or something that he did, or running away from the things that he did in the 80s. It's just overall, like, I love just the little clues that were given about the protagonist. I thought it was just really clever, subtle storytelling that you don't notice the first time. From here, we move on to the first, like, what I'm calling the slice of life track, "Hold On," which kind of sets the tone for the rest of the album. Jesse is just singing at someone and trying to convince them to hold on, and trying to convince them to stay positive and stay focused on their life. I particularly love lines like, "You should never once want to die," and "that awful guilt is not your cross, just something that you were told was fair." And I really love this format. I've always loved songs that are dedicated to a particular person, and the artist is writing things specifically to them. "To Ramona" by Bob Dylan is a song that's very similar to this that I absolutely love. "It Don't Come Easy" is the next track, and I think it gives us one of the most infectious or probably the most infectious chorus on the entire album. It's absolutely amazing, and paired with the really driving, energetic guitar, and just, once again, the insanely skillful harmonica. This dude is killing it on the harmonica. The song is great. Something that adds to the energy of the song is that at the beginning of every verse, we add a few more instruments to where things just slowly build and build and build towards the end. And something that complements that is just how you can hear Jesse's voice break throughout the song. I absolutely love that, how he's just singing all the way at the top of his range, singing his heart out, and things are starting to break a little bit. Not every artist can pull that off, but I think somebody of Jesse's like rugged, kind of shaggy personality, it adds a lot to his music. Lyrically, I would say the song is very similar to Malaise, where we're starting to dip into a little bit more absurdist lyricism, where things are a little bit more up to your interpretation than is typical with Jesse's music. This song is very clearly about somebody falling into helplessness and depression and substance abuse, but it's written in such a subtle way where you may not notice, or there's little things that you can pick out and dissect about the song. And I really appreciate that, because I feel like there are so many songs that are talking about depression and helplessness, which are really real issues, but in very uninteresting ways, where they're just talking about them so on the nose that there's nothing to cling to. It's like, yes, I understand that people are depressed. I understand that you are depressed, but like, you got to talk about it in an interesting way. You got to provide different angles. You have to write about it with some semblance of poetry, which I feel like a lot of people fail to do, but I think this song is an excellent example of that. I kind of equate this song to Mr. Tambourine Man a little bit, where that song is singing about complete helplessness and someone being at the complete bottom of their life, but Bob writes it and sings it in such a nuanced and like uplifting way, where you may not really notice that song is about those things the first couple times you listen to it until you really dig into the lyrics. And I really appreciate that. I appreciate layers. And layers are something that I feel like are completely fading from singer-songwriter and folk music. So I love that Jesse's kind of bringing that back. The next song, Don't Go Giving Up, is a little less interesting lyrically. I think it, once again, kind of dips into some more of those cliches, like In the Morning. But the instrumental of this song is just absolutely outstanding. The really skillful finger picking at the beginning of the song, paired with the really deep, reverberating piano, is just infectious. I love it. And then I also love the really plucky, string-heavy crescendo right after the first Don't Go Giving Up in the chorus. Absolutely infectious. Speaking of really catchy intros, America Girl is next, and I could say the exact same thing. The finger-picking intro of the song is infectious and very memorable. And I also really love the call and response style relationship that Jesse's vocals has with the guitar throughout the verses. I love that, and it's something we don't see very often. Lyrically, I do think that this song leans a little corny, but overall, I think he pulls it off, and I think it does a good job at explaining the very frustrating relationship that a lot of people have with their country. But I think if Jesse didn't have the grit that he has and didn't have the ruggedness that he has, it would be come off as very, very corny and a little half-baked, but I think he's able to pull it off. Also, the harmonica crescendo at the end of every chorus is a total trope, but it works. It's a good trope, and ends up being really energizing. I know I've made like a ton of Dylan comparisons so far, which I don't really like that I'm doing that, but to give one more, this is where you can see the Dylan parallels the most, I think, at least vocally, especially when he says words like girl and feel and real. You can really, really hear the Dylan influence. The next track, Don't Will You Get By, is definitely the most absurdist on the entire album, to where, to be honest, I don't really even have a concise interpretation to provide, because I think you'd have to dig into it a little bit more, and it seems like every verse might have a slightly different meaning, and he's changing perspectives, but either way, I appreciate the layers to it, there being something to dissect in the first place. I do think that in terms of verses, this is probably the best melody in the verses on the whole album. I love how it just slowly gets darker and darker as it builds to the chorus, and then also the call and response with this super loud, growly guitar in the chorus is just is amazing, and I love that as well. And once again, killing it with the harmonica. It's crazy. He's really, really good with it. The next track, Satisfactory, contains a lot of fun wordplay, but overall this track is very, very focused, which is a good thing and a bad thing. I wouldn't say it's as versatile or interesting lyrically, but in a vacuum, it works really well. I really appreciate the part, Decatur, See You Later. Like, that's just really catchy in the song, and think about the folks I knew. I used to know a few. Once again, not to just endlessly list parallels, but I do see the song as very similar to Hello in there. The lines about calling up people he used to knew that used to work at the factory with him reminded me of it, but then also just like the overall vibe and emotion of the song reminded me of it as well. The next song, John, is one that I wasn't a huge fan of initially, but has really grown on me. I will say I don't really like commentating on songs that might be really personal to the artist. Like, if this song is a true story, I don't really think it's right for me to be like dissecting it when it's clearly very personal. The final song on the album, This Age, is not incredibly interesting outside of what it represents, which is very similar to what I was talking about with In the Morning earlier. Joni Mitchell has a really good quote, which is, "A song is not good until it goes through a period of sensitivity to a moment of clarity. Without that moment of clarity, the song is just complaining," which sums up what I was talking about earlier of just like music can't be this thing that's just a vehicle to complain, or just media in general can't be this thing that's just a vehicle to complain. We have to explain, like, okay, what next? Like, things are bad, but what do? We have to have that positivity or that hopefulness, and I love that Jesse is providing that in this song and throughout many other songs in the album, and reminding us that as bad as times may be and as bad as we feel, people have done this before. These things are not new. People have always been this way, and for some people that might be discouraging, but I think if you look at it the right way, that's very encouraging. Like, people have done it before. We can do it too. It'll be okay. And I think that's super important for somebody like Jesse Wells, who has such an incredible amount of talent for writing about social issues, to take himself back and remember to encourage and bring some positivity, as opposed to just, constantly berating these social institutions, which he's great at doing, and there's a lot of value in that. But I just think it's incredibly responsible and humble of Jesse to do what he's doing on this song and other songs throughout the album. So to end off, I went into this album last week feeling a little burnt out on Jesse's music, even though I initially really loved it, kind of for those reasons that I shared, where he's incredibly good at writing, he's incredibly witty, he's incredibly articulate and fun, but I felt like his music was getting a little redundant and repetitive. But then I left this album feeling really refreshed and having a lot more respect for Jesse than I did in the first place. I love that we're seeing him more versatile. I love that we're seeing a little bit more of his range melodically, and I love that we're seeing him being a little bit more skillful with the harmonica and dipping into different subgenres of the acoustic singer-songwriter work. And another thing I love about this album, and just Jesse in general, and I can make an entire video on this, is that folk music, I feel like over the past 25 years or so, has just devolved into kind of a caricature of itself, where it's just a bunch of people trying to imitate the songwriters that were so famous in the 60s and 70s, and all that they're trying to do is mimic the sound of folk music and not the original intention, because folk music is a very descriptive title. It tells you exactly what it is. It's music for folks, and it's music for what people are going through and what people are thinking at the time. So all of these folk singers that are constantly just reminiscing and repeating things that were said in the 60s and 70s is not being true to folk music and not being true to the intention of the genre. But Jesse Wells is the first major folk musician in forever to actually accomplish just that and talk about issues that are current today and talk about things that people are actually struggling with today. I love the fact that a modern folk singer used the word Timu plastic in one of his songs. That's so weird and it's specific. I love it. And I love that all of his music isn't just singing about mountains, or isn't just singing about like phone operators, which nobody uses, or isn't singing about writing really elaborate letters over the sea to your loved one. Just all this like nonsense that nobody does in 2025. Anyway, people like Jesse are very rare. I think he has a lot of potential, and I'm really excited to see what he does going forward, and I'm glad that he's doing so well. If you have not heard this album, I highly recommend that you listen to it. I think it's outstanding. And with that, this has been a reasonable music review. Thank you for watching.